Hi, welcome to this short video. I wanted to talk a bit about a number of things, particularly about Palestine and Israel and what's happening there in Gaza at the moment. And to link that to a more general theme that we are wrestling with or exploring collectively. And the Palestine and Israel situation, I've been reflecting on a lot, because when you listen to people talking about it, the difficulty appears to be between Israelis or Jews and Palestinians or Arabs. And this seems to be a sort of core conflict that's taking place. But I was thinking that behind that, somebody was asking me, what would I do quite a while back, a couple of months back, what would I do if I were Palestinian and living in Gaza? And I thought about it and I said, for a while, what would I do? And then I said, well, I would leave. And the reason that I said I would leave is because I realized that the core issue in all of this is about identification. And what I mean by that is that once you identify with anything other than that we're all human beings, and we really are all one consciousness, then you start to get into polarization, conflict, difficulty. So I was saying, practically, if I were Palestinian or in Palestine, I would leave. I would go somewhere else. If somebody wants to kill me, then I would leave. And they said, but what about your homeland and being Palestinian and all your friends and so on? And I said, well, when you really come down to it, that's a concept. I'm a human being. And I could go and live somewhere else with other human beings who don't want to kill me. And so it got me thinking. I was listening last night to one of the Israeli MPs talking about the situation, and you could hear the strength of this identification with the idea that we're defending ourselves. We've got to defend ourselves. And I was thinking, if you take the whole story of what has happened to the Jewish people and in Israel and Gaza and all of that, you can start to see that if you describe it differently, it has a very different feeling to it. So if you say, during the war, some of us killed and gassed 6 million of us, and now in Israel and Palestine, we went across and took hostage and killed people, and now we are killing more people. You see the insanity of the situation. You see that this is all something we are doing to ourselves. Once you start to create identifications like we are Jewish or Israeli or Palestinian or Arab, then you can separate out your humanity. You lose your connection, and you can treat other people as if they are not you. There is no common connection between you. And in a way, that's the biggest thing that we're wrestling with here. What I could hear from the Israeli minister was his difficulty in seeing that the Palestinians were the same as him. And I think it's very interesting that we have examples already of this in Tibet with the Dalai Lama. When the Chinese invaded, the Dalai Lama made a decision that said, we're not going to fight China, because if we fight China, then we start to get sucked into the very things, the violence, the treating other people as if they're not us. And his approach was, then leave. Give the country to China. If it's that important to China, give it to China. And far better not to kill people. And this theme, of course, is there again in Ukraine, where we are fighting Russia. We in Europe, without sort of admitting it openly, had been fighting a war with Russia through Ukraine. And it's the same issues of separation and identification. And my sense is that what is happening collectively, if you stand back from all of this, is we are beginning to wrestle with and start to see the fact that the earth is one body that we share. It's our collective body. And that you can't separate it down as we have done into individual countries and think that they are not somehow interdependent. If there are environmental issues for the globe, it affects all of us. We can't separate it into countries. And you start to see that the identifications that we create are creations of our mind. You know, there is no such thing as America. If you go to America and stand on the soil there, it doesn't say America on it, and it doesn't, the land doesn't think it's America. The land's just the land, and it's all connected across the globe. It's we who create these divisions with our minds and these identifications. And it's the same issue in Ukraine. As soon as you start to create identifications, you start to create division and separation, and ultimately the seeds for conflict. And I think at a broader level, this is what we're trying to understand and work with when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We're wrestling with this creative tension that we both are completely interdependent and connected, and one. Our consciousness is just one. There is just one of us. And yet we all experience it through an individual vehicle, our bodies and personalities. So we live with this slightly uncomfortable tension that we both know at a very deep level that we're one with everybody, and yet our experience is individual. And when we forget that creative tension, we're caught in the individual way when we identify with anything individual, like being male or female, or with our ethnic background, etc., etc. Suddenly other people become them. Suddenly other people are separate from us and we're disconnected. And that leads to conflict within us and conflict with other people. So we're really trying to understand, as we're dealing with the globe, how to get the hang of this creative tension. It might take us thousands of years, I don't know. I don't think so. It might take us hundreds of years to fully understand this. But you can see then the environmental crisis in a different light. You can see that the environmental crisis is waking us up to our collective body. And I was working with a whole group of young offenders, all of whom had spent time in prison recently. And what really struck me about it was, and we also had mentors for each of them, so it was a mixed group of people, but the session took off. And the reason it took off was because in trying to facilitate it, I was focusing on what is it that makes us all absolutely the same. And you could watch in the room the sense of heart just whoosh. Everybody felt connected because everyone saw we're all wrestling with our lives. We're all finding it difficult. We're all learning. We're all trying to do our best to understand our personalities, to understand other people, all this sort of stuff. But in essence, there's no difference between our lives. If we're successful, we assume that will make us happy, and yet the evidence doesn't point to that. And we all saw what we're really looking for is a feeling of connection. And it was just lovely to watch these people from such different backgrounds just see they were the same and wrestling with the same things. How do you make a relationship work? How do you connect to your family? And one of the young men, we were talking about what had made the difference for them, what had shifted things for them, and for the mentors as well. And what everybody was talking about was the fact that often the worst experiences, like one of the young men was talking about when he was stabbed, and he said, up till that point, the attraction of gangs had been strong. You know, the promise was wealth and money, you know, fancy cars, women, etc., etc. You know. And then he said when he was stabbed, he realized the reality of his experience was walking around the whole time, looking over his shoulder, totally paranoid and worried, and then ending up stabbed. But he said he hadn't thought about it. He said, but when he reflected on it, that was the turning point. Had he not been stabbed, he wouldn't have woken up to the reality of his situation and what he really wanted in his life. And he said from that point on, he started to turn his life around. And all the other young men were talking about exactly the same types of experience, that prison had woken them up or other experiences. And so were the mentors, you know, the experiences that none of us would have chosen. You know, we wouldn't, like, we were laughing. I was saying to the young man, you wouldn't have thought, you know, I think what I really need now is to get stabbed so that I'll wake. You would not think that. And I can see the same is true. It's the same thing going on at a collective level. None of us would choose Palestine, the situation with the Palestinians and Israelis in Gaza. It is unthinkable. And yet, it is an opportunity every time for us collectively to wake up, to see more with our consciousness. And if you stand right back, which can appear heartless, but is important, is you both want, again, this creative tension, you both want to empathize with all the fellow human beings suffering in this situation, but at the same time, see that the point of all this pain is to provoke our consciousness to shift, to see what is causing our suffering. And so I see then you start to look at everything that's happening in a very different way. All the current furore over economics and tariffs and all of this are again pointing us at the same issue, that economically we're completely interdependent. You know, we're sort of waking up to that. Hold on a minute, you know. But then people like Trump play an interesting role. You see they are catalysts. You don't mistake them for being other than you, alien, and somehow, you know, forcing you into your judging mind, where you are full of negative analysis and judgment, and you jump onto the one side who are the good people against the people who are the bad people. You see them as catalysts, cosmic jokers, if you like, to wake us all up to see something. You know, I mean, with the young man who got stabbed, you could get involved in the whole drama about who stabbed him and that was so awful and it shouldn't have happened and blah, 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 and get lost in all that and miss that the experience of being stabbed completely woke this young man up and changed his life. So you stop seeing that is wrong. In the same way, Trump, other leaders, Putin, all of this, Netanyahu, etc., you see that their role somehow is different. You're looking less to judge them and separate from them, and more to see them in the light of, here is somebody provoking us collectively to wake up. What are we learning here? So let me be clear that I'm not advocating that Palestinians leave Gaza, that is a solution. But what I do say, and what I also said is, were I in the situation and I couldn't leave, I would treat it as an opportunity for me to learn and bring everything I could as a human being to the situation. And I think that speaks to what do you do in these situations? And in our lives generally, what is it that we can do about situations like this? And I think the answer is that if we can see them and learn from them and understand them, we can then become part of changing our consciousness and the way that we get caught, because we all get caught in this as well at our own minor level. That's our field. That's the bit we can influence, is to change that and to see where we are getting caught in division and opposition and us and them with other people for the same reasons, because we miss the identification with our consciousness, and we identify with our personalities, with our backgrounds, all of that, and that's a real opportunity to collectively work with this. And I think if we can work with it and learn what life is trying to get us to see and evolve in relation to, there's a fantastic opportunity that if you keep doing that at an individual level, you offer something, and the field of collective consciousness begins to shift. And that all the change management work that I've done in large organizations over the years, that's the bit that I began to notice, was change happens when somebody's consciousness shifts. And it's like an infection. If you can get a shift, a genuine shift in your own consciousness, because that's the only bit you really control, it creates the possibility for change or shift in the awareness of others. And it often spreads like one person at a time, and then suddenly, whoosh, reaches a sort of tipping point, as people like Malcolm Gladwell in his book at the time about the tipping point many years ago was really good at seeing. And you start to see that people like a Mandela and a Dalai Lama and others have that sort of impact because their personal own consciousness shifts, not because they try and shift the consciousness of others around them. It's a more attractive thing rather than a push. The temptation is to push others to change, and that never works. Instead, when you create the change in your own consciousness, it's attractive. People are attracted to that, and over time, that is far more powerful. Once you're pushing other people, no matter how good your motives, it acts as a repelling force. It creates the very thing that it's trying to get away from. So I think the more of us that can see this situation without falling in Israel and Palestine, without falling into the overwhelming temptation to take sides or to fight or to condemn, it's difficult to do. It doesn't mean that you're not honest about the situation or that you like it. Obviously, none of us could like that situation or what's being done. But how do you stay present with it? How do you not get sucked into the taking of sides? How do you stand back and stay in us? Okay, thank you for watching this.